Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and my co-host is Austin Chadwick. And today we have Joel Norman with us, and we're going to talk about community with Canton Coders and mobbing and amplifying the unheard voice and growing everyone. So, Joel, why don't you introduce yourself? Talk a little bit about what got you here, and then maybe we can dive into those topics.
Wonderful. So, let me take you back to pre-pandemic. Do you remember those days? Do you remember when these things called meetups happened and you would go and have beer and talk code with people?
Oh, yeah.
So I lived in Michigan at the time, and I had a community of friends that lived in between Detroit and Ann Arbor. And if you're not from Michigan, I'll give you a map. Detroit's here, Ann Arbor's here, and guess where Canton is? Right there.
Right in the middle.
And every meetup was an hour from Canton, Michigan.
Mm.
So a couple of friends of mine and I decided that we would not be allowed to, by our wives, to drive an hour to go to any meetup. So we figured, why not Canton, Michigan, where we all live, and we'll have a meetup. So we got Bob Allen to speak. I think Bob Allen's been on this show a couple times. And we're going to have Bob Allen come speak in person at the Canton Library. And then this small thing called COVID happened. We had almost 100 people sign up to show up at Canton Coders. So our A/B testing showed there was a need for a meetup in Canton, Michigan. And we never went to the library, and we never met. What happened was we pivoted online, and we just started A/B testing. What does a meetup look like during COVID times? Meanwhile, half our members moved out of Michigan because they were developers, and why live in a cold state when you can live in Florida? And we grew into this group of, Canton Coders. There's a Canton in almost every state. Is there a Canton where you live?
No, that's a good question.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
so most people think we're in Canton, Ohio. That's fine. There's a Canton, China. That's great. But we have community members from around the world, and we get together and we just work on code. One of our mottos is, we're not about our employers, we're about us. We like employers. They keep us paid. But we're about the coder and only the coder. Work on you, not for them. And that's mainly our story. Is since we started doing that, we've helped at least 36 people that I'm aware of get better jobs, where they're treated better as coders. And that doesn't mean they're doing TDD or pair programming or anything zealotry. They're just doing things like going home at 4, having good health insurance, and being treated with respect. And we're pretty non-biased. Some of us like TDD, some of us like mobbing, some of us like all the things. Some of us just show up to find a new job, and that's cool too. But that's a little about our community. We started in Canton, Michigan. We never met there. We're on the internet. And I don't know how many people are in the group because we don't track, but we're in the several hundreds at this point. So, that's my story about Canton Coders.
Awesome. Well, thanks for telling that kind of origin story of Canton Coders. And what's funny is I actually kind of saw it happening from my perspective, sitting in California, but watching it happen remotely. And what's funny, I did just look it up. There is a Canton, California, funny enough, but But what I noticed was all of a sudden, there's all these like meetups happening with people I respect, like hosting these meetups, and they're doing mob programming, and like, this looks really cool. And what's funny is, until you told that story, I had no idea that you guys never met in person. I just figured like, this was an established, in-person meetup. And then all of a sudden they just made a great pivot and have had all these great hosts and great people showing up at this meetup.
Great story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where the world was different, and there's a lot of people in a software community that just want to give back. And when you just start asking, can you come speak up at this meetup? And we're here to help coders. We're not here to sell things. We have salespeople, we have recruiters, but since the normal rule in our community is don't talk about your employer, none of the normal meetup stuff happens. So you don't have the recruiters in the back row. We've had a couple organizations actually try to make some acquisitions of emails lists, and we just told them, no one makes money from this. It's an LLC. I pay $8 a year for a domain, $2 a month for hosting. And, if we ever get sued, it's going to be the fastest thing I've ever folded.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing what happens. And this is where I got connected with the Mob Mentality Show. Right. This is how our paths crossed, because you were doing great things with mobbing, and we kind of started borrowing mobbing as, in my day job, I kind of use it anyways, but we just started doing mobbing on the internet during COVID, and people did it. And so from your perspective, we often know, I'm going to turn the tables here. From your perspective in California, what else did you see? Because I know what I saw, but I'm biased. What did you see?
Yeah, what I saw was It was just like, oh, I saw tweets and posts about meetups from Canton Coders, and then it's like, oh, Woody was at one, and then you guys had this great recording of a mobbing session, and then Bob Allen was there, and then I think you and I started chatting, and then we've been networking since then, and yeah, and basically I just seen people coming out of them excited about learning, excited about mob programming, and yeah, it just it's been fun to be part of the community in that way. And I guess maybe one follow-up question I have is, what was the impact on mobbing in this community compared to other ways of doing a meetup, for example? Yeah.
So one of the things that was really interesting was in the Midwest, trying to frame it in a way that is understood. So mobbing, although is a decade old, right? A lot of organizations, especially in Michigan, which is manufacturing centric, is totally about the individual performance of software developers. So you know the story, software developers and companies get a stack of cards, walk back to their desk and write code. And then all of a sudden, they're no longer burdened with code because they're sitting at home with a lot of slack time because these companies went from remote to at home. There's a lot of slack time in the world. Is they started looking for community events. Right? How do I connect with the water cooler talk? And what happened was people would start talking at work about meetups. And what would we do is we start doing meetups and we start running tests and A/B testing content. And mob programming came one of those things that we could do with 2 minutes of prep, right? Pick a kata, get someone to host a Zoom call, send out a PowerPoint deck as a picture in 30 seconds, and get 15 people to show up and have a good time. Yeah. So mob programming was a way that people could just communicate. I mean, we might do the tennis kata, but they would just talk and have a social community, because think in Michigan, we went through a lot of lockdowns, right? Nothing was open. We couldn't even go boating. And so people were looking for that social aspect. So we just said, we're going to do mob programming. So we do mob programming with Bob, mob programming with Camille Bell, mob programming with people you probably know, and they would show up in mob. Yeah. And then what would happen was, we A/B testing, right? We chase how we help people. So we're measuring it in the background. And what we started to notice was there's distinct persona groups out in community groups, right? And there's new and growing people. There's people that like development that don't want to develop. There's crusty developers, people that used to code but want to code. There's leaders of developers that want to connect but don't want to talk about work-related things. They just want to peer with other leaders. So we started doing mobbing groups to help the new and growing developers, which I shout out to Karen, who led that group. She led it. And I think, and I'll have to tell a story here, and I'm trying to tell it by changing all names, so it's safe. But there was a person in our group, and we're going to call this person, give me a good name.
Bob Joe.
Bob Joe. Bob Joe had come to our group straight out of college in COVID, right? Classic computer science graduate. You remember those days. And just didn't know how the world worked in software development. And Bob Joe showed up to our new and growing work, right? And tested the boundaries of the mob. Mobs are great because they hug people back, right? And what happened was Bob, after a year of trying, got their first job. And then what happened was, we don't track this data. It just comes back once in a while. Then there was a person named Insia, and shout out to Insia. I can use her name. She came to our country. She married my friend Yusuf. She's really passionate about software development. And she got involved with Nathan and some other people and Karen and got mentorship and mob programming. So they get together once a week and just do mob programming. And Insia developed her career during COVID and has gotten successful, job placement coaching from these mobbing groups. Because ultimately, the mobbing group has taught people how to have social interaction as humans and talk about coding. And it's not about producing story points or producing flow or anything corporate in our world. It's about building community and building space for those, traditionally marginalized voices. And I'm not saying demographic. I'm saying the new developers that don't know how to communicate, that don't have podcasts. Remember those days?
Yeah.
That would walk in and go, Austin, your code sucks, right? And that would make people mad. In our mobbing environment at Canton Coders, right, has created a space where people just know how to have a good social gathering and get things done. And that's how mobbing has really helped change the life in Canton Coders. We don't swear by it. It's not something we start up to do. It's what we revert to. So it's just one of those things. We try to do pairing, but how do you do pairing on Zoom? It's not interactive. And we've gotten better at changing keywords and stuff, but it's just one of those things where mobbing has really helped people outside of corporate America get better jobs. And what we're here about is you as a person, as a coder, because not many people are looking at coders. Not a lot of people are looking at people that work in IT, and they're often not treated well, are they? They work late nights, they carry pagers. And as we work with coders to help them be better coders, they're able to get better jobs, which allows them to go home and spend time with their families and also get paid better to spend more time doing hobby, which hopefully isn't code. And that's what we're doing. Like when we talk about amplifying the unheard voice, is we're creating space for everyone to communicate on an internet forum where we don't have to turn on our cameras. And it's just fun. Also, we get to pull in big names to talk to us, like people that you've heard of, but I don't want to mention their names because I'm amplifying the people you haven't heard of. Go find Nathan, right? Go find Karen, because they volunteer and invest in people, and they don't go on the speaking circuit, but they're amazing.
Yeah. So kind of you told a few stories there about amplifying the unheard voice. How did amplifying the unheard voice become a goal as part of this meetup? Like, what was the origin of that?
So it may be a bias for me and some of my friends. And so I'm going to call it out there. But the big name talkers, the big name bloggers, they go around, they have the ability to self-promote. And I have the ability to market. And so do you. So does the Mob Mentality show. Right. And we figured, okay, we could have the big name voices come, and they're great to get an audience, right? But once we have the name, right, we can then slip in everyone that really needs to talk to people. And that's the people doing the work. That's the new thought leaders. That's a new space. So what we started doing was using the brands, some of the brands that we use now with legal permission to come talk in our group are great brands, because people are like, what's that big company doing? And all of a sudden they expect to see an SVP or a CIO show up. And it's the leaders in these organizations creating space for these new and growing developers, these seasoned developers that know a lot of things that don't speak, to come talk to a group. So I'll tell a story in A/B testing about our American Airlines Lunch and Learn. So shout out to Ben Burbank for orchestrating this for us. But we had American Airlines come talk to us about Spotify backstage. And we did it. We had about 100 people show up on the live Zoom call. I don't know. We had like 1,200 views on YouTube, which is nothing, right, on the scheme of things. But it's big for
our community. That's big for our community.
Yeah.
I think, right. Yeah.
And what happened was, and not to pick on Carl and the rest of the people that came and spoke, but if you Googled Carl, you'd get his LinkedIn page. You wouldn't get his YouTube talks. You wouldn't get anything about that. But what happened is, using SEO, we put the YouTube chat, we put the chat up on YouTube. And all of a sudden, Carl and Lucas said, we're getting, like, when you search backstage Spotify, we're the #1. And people are saying, we saw you on the Canton Coders YouTube stream. And what's happening is this like cycle where kind of borrow the fame, right? And then we do the thing well and with a good topic. And then we use the great topic, the good brand, to create this space for these people you haven't heard of yet that you'll hear from in the future. And then you come back and we do it again. And that's where we're really amplifying those voices, because then what happens is these leaders go, there's a group of, there's thousands of groups like this out there. I don't know thousands, but there's a lot of them. Like, shout out to Columbus JavaScript group, very similar group. Their leaders come from these organizations and go, I want to hire those people, right? I want to be in that community. So they come and they post stuff in our jobs channels for free. They don't tell us anything about it. You can post your employer there, and they come get hired. And then in the background, we hear Insia got a new job, right? We hear so-and-so hired so-and-so. And then the loop just amplifies and gets a little bigger and a little bigger. And we're borrowing the fame and we're amplifying the unheard voices, because have you heard any of the big name speakers lately?
Yeah. And you're right. It's been really fun to see. And actually, we got to work with you for one of these events. And it's really, really awesome to give people an opportunity who are really hungry and eager to practice speaking or to practice getting out there, to give them that opportunity. And I really, it's been something I've been doing lately too is just pairing with people. You know, like I'll know someone who really wants to practice speaking or who wants to get out there and try that kind of stuff. And either we'll do a talk together or we'll sign up for a conference session together to host one. And it's been really fun to see people get those opportunities, and they do great.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, they could go speak at the big summits.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather hear from those people doing real work.
Yeah.
Than the people that are on Twitter making PowerPoints all day. Wouldn't you?
Nice.
It's interesting because I've always shared that sentiment that I've always thought that public speaking is really important to a software career in general, and that evolved into multiple like kind of lightning talk opportunities internally and things like that, and then inviting others to do like cooperative public speaking events. And I've seen a lot of people actually throughout my career before having such a good environment that end up getting walked all over because they didn't know how to speak in front of people, even if it was just a one-on-one conversation. And so building that skill up, I think, is incredibly important. And I think mobbing helps especially with that like 1 to 5 person conversation, and getting up in front of people. And you're going to be stuck presenting to an executive at some point. And there's a high cost of failure, but you can make that a really low risk encounter too, for anyone in their career by getting those opportunities to do those things.
Yeah, and the piggyback on the mobbing is that's the first step.
Yeah.
When I'm new, right? When I'm new to an organization, and I don't have this problem anymore, but I don't want to code in front of others.
Yeah.
So if you can go to a safe place like Canton Coders, where you can even put up a fake name, like Bobby, what was it? Bob someone?
Joe or something.
Bob Joe, right?
Yeah.
I can
Bobby
show up with
Boucher.
my camera off, right?
Yeah.
And like Bob Joe, nobody knows where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
And I can just practice being myself and mobbing. And that's the first step, because our craft is a social craft with technical skill set. And that's where the mobbing aspect of all of this has been our, I don't want to say secret to success, because it shouldn't be a secret.
Yeah.
It should be the way 99% of code is written in life.
Yeah.
And it should be the 99, how you do any type of work should almost be mobbing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's
Totally
something
agree.
you can't mob on in life. Maybe unicycles. I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and one thing I really like about your approach too is you have a mix of big names that you said to because those are great voices to hear too, but also kind of the authentic stories from boots on the ground kind of thing. And I love doing that too. And you'll notice in our show, if you look through the history, every few episodes or so are just a team that has a story to share from encountering something. You know what I mean? And I love, because like you said, there's no gimmicks, there's no selling of anything, and there's nothing wrong with selling a coaching service or any of that kind of stuff. But it is really great to hear a story or a practice from the perspective of someone who's doing it every day and is just sharing something that they enjoyed.
And they're passionate about it because they volunteered to prepare a presentation for it, and they went through it. And that's what that's what I think our global technology community should be like. We're just here to do cool stuff, build cool software, go home at 4, and be social and kind. And the best way this is the mob mentality show, so I can say it enough. I'll say ensemble programming, so we don't say word, that word.
Yeah.
We don't say mob a lot. But in my experience as a professional and just as a coder, this is the way. And if it's not happening, where you work, where it's not, maybe you don't need to mob on writing out DTO classes, right? Maybe that's do it by yourself or a pair. But if you don't get the opportunity to do mob programming on a regular basis, you should totally look for communities and places that you get to do it. And if you haven't tried it and you're not, and you're skeptical of it, come try it with us. Unless there's a way, what are other ways with mob mentality? I'm not trying to pitch Canton Coders. Is there another way to try it?
Yeah. So we have a Trello board of resources. We'll put the link in the show notes, and there's one column that's called pairing, mobbing, meetup events or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's got pretty sure you are listed in there. If not, I'm going to add it very soon.
And I know Bob Allen does a ton of it.
Yeah. And then there's some companies there who have a card in that column for like, hey, you can come visit Mob with us. We have a card to come do visiting mobbing session with us. And then there's just a couple other people who do like, there's Pub Mob up there, and then a couple other coaches who have sessions that they host every once in a while. And so, yeah, and I think, and maybe this is a good pivot to another question, which is, so we've talked about, there's Canton Coders, which is awesome, go check it out. And there's some other communities, but like the origin story of what you shared with us was you all started a meetup, so what advice would you give for someone who wanted to start a meetup and start a community? They like see they have an interest, they see a need, what advice would you give there?
Don't start it during COVID. Yeah. So the main thing is professionalism.
Yeah.
What I mean is do what you say you're going to do and do it. And do it to the best ability that you can do. That doesn't mean buying everyone steak dinners. That doesn't mean doing, top of the top. But if you're going to commit to something, we talk about our say-do ratio, it should be 1-to-1. Do it because you have a love for community, not because you're trying to self-promote. Build, one of the anti-patterns I see in our space right now is a lot of, there's nothing wrong with self-promotion, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But if that is the only reason you're doing it, it's not going to be magnetic unless you are literally a cult leader. I think that is the definition of a cult. And then just don't call it a meetup. Call it, whatever you want to call it. Just don't call it a meetup. But if I'm trying to start a community group, have a mission, and then don't take yourself too seriously. And that's the self-promotion. And the final advice is build that core group of people that are going to lean in and they're going to help and they're going to hold you honest. So I moved to Indianapolis in May. I don't remember how many number. I don't know the number of months that is, but I moved to Indianapolis in May, and we came to a point where we said, I don't live in Canton, Michigan anymore. Does this make sense? I'm kind of like the chief instigator, nor I don't want to. And during COVID, we had a lot of people that were volunteering because there's a lot of slack time, right? But as people went back to work, family time is more important than meetups. And so they couldn't commit so much. So we were at a point where we're like, do we put Canton Coders to bed? We say it served its purpose. Do we kill it off? And then we didn't do anything for 2 months. And we just watched the A/B testing. What was going to happen? And all of a sudden we said, let's try one event. And boom, there was more interest and we pivoted. So when you're starting an event, when you're starting a meetup, be ready to kill it if it doesn't reach your goal, right? It's not about you. It's about the community you're building, and build a group of core people that'll support you. And I have that. I mean, there's Matt, there's Nate, there's Karen. There's a lot of people I'll offend if I don't name them. So I'm not going to name them. You're offended. The idea is, you can't say it enough. And I teach today. I was teaching a 6-hour class, so I have to say it 3 times. It's never about you. It's about the core mission, and be ready to kill it if it doesn't make sense.
Nice.
So, it's just one of those things. Too many meetups start off with great intentions. And then the thing that happens is there's a meetup. The reason why I think Canton Coders has truly been successful is we're generally kind, right? We don't talk about political things. We're kind. We don't even talk tabs versus spaces. That's too political for us. Because tabs are clearly better. They take less space on the Git repo, right?
Obviously.
Yeah. But we're generally kind. We don't care about, we care about you as a human. But after that, we don't care where you work. We don't care what you do. We don't care anything about that. We care about a human. And then the term code is so broad that we're not going to die off when a new version of React comes out. Like I see meetups for Salesforce. I see meetups for these, particular technologies. And I say, there is a passion for salespeople, Salesforce people. I'm sure there is a core group of Salesforce people that are amazing to work with. But if you're trying to start a community, pick broad. Code is pretty broad. It's like running a meetup for photography. I'm sure there's different formats of photography, but when you build a community for photography, you could be like, I guess telescopes fit in. And so, there's a group for mobbing crew in our Slack channel. There's a group for dojos. That's a new one. There's a group for leaders. And there's these other groups that can fit underneath our umbrella. And so if you're going to start a community, I would start also with a broad topic. And I didn't prepare that. So that's why it's a little around the world there as I get down to, I guess there's 5 points.
Nice. Right on. Yeah. And, and as far as it goes, like logistically hosting it, how do you welcome people? Like, how does it start off?
Totally. So let's just go, let's go back to the basics. This is low cost, lean. 30 seconds in a PowerPoint after I get people arranged to come talk. We send it out. We see if people sign up. Mostly, we get good signups. We run it, we record it. Matt uploads it to the YouTube channel. Low production value, high content value, totally authentic. But there is nothing masterful behind this. And I was impressed with your countdown checklist, because maybe Matt and I should do that. That way we have audio all the way through our 100, our sessions. The levels are balanced. We don't have accidentally Zoom recordings and things incoherent. But that's what we do.
Hey, so I wanted to ask about when you get somebody new to the group, how do you bootstrap them into mobbing? Because I think you mentioned earlier that you get somebody new and they've not really talked to people before. How do you introduce them to the topic, and then how do you guide them going forward? I know mobbing has some built-in guidance, or ensembling has some built-in guidance, but what do you do for an initial bootstrap of an ensemble?
To be honest, we usually just throw people in. It's a pretty simple thing to catch on to. And when we bootstrap it, we call it a mob programming event. And I'm assuming some people may Google what that means and probably come up with something you've created. So thank you. But what we find is, since this isn't job related, we can just push people in, and there's so much safety that you can just turn off your camera if you don't like it. Then we kind of explain that, it's a really simple pattern to pick up. There's a navigator. There's a group of, since we're not professional about it, there's a group of trolls and mob people. So sometimes it's just a lot of trolling and having fun. And then we switch drivers depending on whoever's leading. If we want to share remote, keyboard, mouse, sometimes we try Cyber Dojo or different tooling. But since we're not too serious about it, we try a lot of things that don't work. So when we bring people in, we throw them in, see what works. And if it doesn't work, we stop doing it. But what we do find is people want to do this. And the best part is, when you're running a community group, you can sit in the background and just watch the whole theatrics go on and have a good time. And so the other thing is, we're not an employer. We don't have to force people to participate. So if you're doing mob programming at work and someone hasn't spoken 6 months, you probably are like, what's going on there? Let's have a one-on-one, seek to understand. But in a community group, you have someone hasn't spoken 6 months. We're glad you're here.
Yeah. So that kind of gives me another question. So say that somebody joins the group, and you may or may not have had this in the past, but I'm curious about it. And maybe they have been mobbing in the group, and they want to mob at work, but they can't convince leadership at their company to start mobbing or something. Do you have any pointers on like the economics of mobbing for people?
Yeah, so I'm going to turn a little from Canton Coders and just go to kind of what I do professionally. So it's really interesting as you see organizations struggle with what they consider a talent gap, or not enough talent. If you're a developer out there and you really don't like your job, why are you still there? Right now, a developer can go work anywhere, and it's remote, right? You could probably have 3 job offers by the end of the week if you looked hard enough. But what I'm seeing in the industry, and this is the cool thing about Canton Coders, is I get to talk to a lot of people, is, first of all, when you look at a developer and you look at all the dysfunction in a lot of big organizations, you see a lot of things like handoffs, knowledge silos, individual performance gains. I mean, if you look at our Twitter account on Canton Coders, there was someone on there that basically told us how to defeat the Dark Scrum Master. which is hilarious. So this is a community stuff we talk about, and I'll tie it into mobbing in a second. But basically, there are companies out there, and probably a lot of them, that still do things like we're doing agile, but we're assigning single development cards to a human, right? And your bonus is based upon the number of points. And what that does is you may think you're doing the right thing as a leader, but then you start to see the dark Scrum, the dark Agile, and the shadow government come out with the software developers. So what happens is developers start looking at the story cards, and they're like, oh, that's a 13-pointer. If only I could do that. But does it have dependencies? Do I have to see if Billy Bob is available because only Billy Bob knows that code base? Oh, Billy Bob's got a card that I can't get help with, right? And so you start to see these behaviors that are underneath like the water surface, because the developers are sitting there writing code. Oh, I'm busy, boss. Every day in their stand up, they're like, oh, it's green. We'll be done tomorrow. And then the next day it's not done. It's not done. And nobody feels safe to see what's going on, right? So you have all this hidden waste underneath the scenes. And then what you do is, and this is what I've seen in the community and what I kind of see professionally, is you go, what is the one prescription that can force all of that to the surface, right? Really quick. Two things you can do. First of all, one computer, one card, and only the people you need in the room. Do you have a name for that? I think that's called ensemble programming or mob programming. And the second thing is, every 2 days, as a leader, I'm going to show up and ask 2 questions. What impeded you from getting your job done, right? And how can I help you?
Yeah. That
will drive all of that to the work surface, because what you're doing is that is like the cheapest consulting advice in the world. Because, I mean, you guys work as leaders, and this is not about day jobs. This is about community. But when you do that, there is nothing that can be really hidden in a 2-day iteration and in a mob, because now we've gotten rid of the individual incentives, right? We've gotten rid of the handoffs. Oh, it's over in QA. Well, QA is sitting next to me or virtually remote to me, right? Well, I can't put 24 people, this is the conversations I've seen. Well, I can't have 24 people working one story. Why does it take 24 people to do one thing, right? And what you see in the economics comes out is, okay, right now, and I don't know the standard Caper-Jones model, but now I'm going to turn consultant on you for a second. Is that okay? And I'm not pitching any brand. So Caper-Jones says $16,000 per rework of every item out there, right? And so if you don't know your defect rate and you're a software developer and you want to do mob programming, first of all, figure out how many defects are going out. And not to production, just to rework to your group. So the first thing you do is you go, it costs, according to Caper-Jones, which is some Gartner 4-quadrant model, right? You can find those too. It costs $16,000 per rework item. Did you know that? And oh, by the way, last quarter, we had 100 of them. And I'm not really good at mathematics, but I think that is $160,000, right? And then, every leader sitting like, yeah, okay, there's 2 ways they can take that. Oh, no, it's not $16,000 a year. And this is what happens. This is literally what I see. Leadership sends the enterprise architecture out there and they go, no, it's only $14,700. You were wrong. And you're like, okay. So we're only spending $147,000 minimum in reworking quarter, not including the words cost of delay.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, we can't do all this stuff. And you're like, well, what if we tried mob programming? What if we put everybody in a room that could ship a piece of software and we just tried it for 2 weeks? I suspect, and I would bet, that we'd have fewer defects, right? What else are we going to have? We're going to have faster cycle time because we're going to have no handoffs. We're going to make those product people in the evil business, I'm saying that facetiously, we're going to have to make them actually make a single list of high priority things. So they can't have 37 hopes. They have to go, this is the thing we want. And it's going to be the forcing function to get things to work. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at the economics of mob programming is, instead of having 24 people in a room doing mobbing, what if you could have 8 business bets being run? Well, I'm trying to do my math here. 4 or 5 people. What is that? 4 mobs?
Yeah. Roughly. That's good.
Yeah. 4 devs plus some product person, maybe, to help prioritize it if needed. So all of a sudden, we're making, we're forcing the business to do 4 real good bets, right? We cut the overhead cost of orchestration and dependencies. And now Like the worst thing that happens is we got to stop the wheels, stop 4 cards and story process, get everybody together in a big room and go, our code architecture is not good enough to support 4 work streams. So what do you think we need to do about it? And then all of a sudden the economics start to play in our favor. Because I suspect right now, if you want to adopt mob programming, go ask your leadership what their costing model looks like, what their cycle times look like, and there isn't transparency to that. So you can come back and use Caper Jones in the four quadrant model, right? And Harvard Business Review to cite industry standards and say, can we adopt this? And now, especially with mob mentality resources, there are studies out about mob programming, right? And ensemble programming. And there's even research studies from MIT about this type of group work, not called mob programming, being more cost effective. And the economics of it is when you go back to it, and I'm going to steal a Woody line, show me that it's cheaper to have individual threaded people working on a card. Because at least with mob programming, I can get your defect rate down. And then when it costs the cost of hiring and onboarding, what's your current cost of bringing someone into your team and going, oh, by the way, here's a monolithic code base, right? And you need to talk to these 37 different people to get access to the code. And we got to read you into these cryptic story cards that don't make sense because I don't know who the database user is. I write a payment processing system, right? And so is that one of our customers?
Yeah.
And instead I go, hey, it's your first day, welcome. So this is how we operate here. What's the induction ceremony for getting someone up to speed in mob programming? Is it measured in minutes?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think when people visit or we hire somebody new, it's literally jump in and start kind of the osmosis absorption as you go, and then they're contributing new ideas, you know, very, very quickly, just because like, oh, hey, I don't know anything about you're talking about, but this algorithm, I can totally help you make it, right?
Or I have no idea what you're talking about. That just looks weird. And you know what? It's broken.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And the key thing is the economics of it is it doesn't make sense not to do it now.
Yeah.
Unless you have a good study saying, hey, look, we have the world's best set of engineers. That's awesome. But when those people inevitably leave and get better jobs, you're going to need to have the ability to onboard new developers, and mobbing is the way.
Right.
So economically, I don't know factual numbers, right? You can look at the studies, look at the emergent when big manufacturing companies are moving to mob programming in divisions. There is value there that can't be probably publicly shared. But when you just look at it from a logical standpoint, if you want to adopt mob programming at your big company, go ask your leadership politely for data proving that the current method is effective enough. Because I guarantee on the quarterly and yearly bonus segments, cycle time and defect rate is one of those things hanging. And then politely say, I have an idea to reduce cycle time, increase cross-functionality of the team, right? Reduce defects, and raise the NPS score about how happy people are here, because that's just a side effect of mob programming, right? And can we please try it for 2 weeks and experiment? And then I bet you you'll do it. And then you'll probably do it forever. Once people get past, you know, especially virtually, you don't even have to deal with, that just doesn't look efficient. Like nobody sees what you're doing anymore. But those are wonderful things. And that's what I like to plug is if you're not doing mob programming, and that means what, 4 + 1, 4 people plus a PO, give or take a head or two.
Yeah.
It
can vary depending on the teams, but yeah,
you're the experts in it.
Yeah. I've seen, you know, one PO PM to a, you know, 15 people or, you know, with multiple mobs or even just, you know, 1 PO and 3 people. But in general, it's really along the budgetary lines and the cost of delay really of the items being developed.
Oh yeah. And when you're building out how much did the story card cost?
Yeah.
Well, what did the team cost? Right. Oh,
Yeah.
It looked like that was from start to end 2 weeks. Okay. That's not hard math.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When you look at the economics of, are we making the right investment? So as a PO, you want to do this too. It's much easier to figure out how much things cost.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think we're running up on time right now. And so do you have anything that you want to share or plug before we close it out?
I'm not going to plug the community. What I'm going to do is have an honest conversation with developers listening. if you're not being treated well by your employer, it is 2021, almost 2022. Most companies are remote. You are not your job. You are not your code. It's okay not to have a coding fanatic lifestyle. Find some place that's going to allow you to go home at 4 and enjoy what you want to do in your life. So is it okay I plug that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that resonates with me. You know, when I started my career, was me and my wife said, hey, these are the type of jobs we want, you know, and it's kind of the inverse car count, right? Instead of the manager going after work and being like, oh, how many cars are still here? Yes, I'm good. I'm making them work overtime, right? It's always been the inverse for me. Like, how many cars? There should be 0 cars there after a certain time, and then I know this. Okay, this is a good place, you know.
Yep.
So, but I don't know how you count cars now that we're remote. But anyways.
I used to say you don't have to go home, but you can't code here. But now I can't really say that anymore. So I got to figure out a new saying.
Turn off the Git repository.
Yeah.
Turn off the CI
pipelines for everybody.
Nice. Well, thank you, Joel, for sharing with us today. You know, loved hearing, you know, the origin story of Canton Coders and community and amplifying the kind of unheard voice. It was great to hear your pitch for kind of work-life balance and also kind of an economic case for mob programming. Thank you for sharing all these wonderful things with us. And you know, hearing your passion is, you know, it's really clear and it's inspiring. And so if you're feeling inspired like me, please like and subscribe and share this video with someone else. And then until next time, everybody, mob well and have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.